In the spirit of Halloween, paranormal or not, what is the scariest, creepiest or most unsettling experience of your life? I was like 8 years old talking to my uncle using AOL Instant Messenger. I went upstairs for a glass of milk, and when I closed the fridge door, the shadow of a very tall man was swaying back and forth from our living room, which was blocked off by a wall. I stood frozen for a few seconds, then slowly crept back around our kitchen island to see if the front door was unlocked. It was. I slowly crept back down the steps to the basement. As I descended, I heard a clear, deep-sounding laugh coming from the living room, and I bolted back down to the office, locked the door, and told my sister there's someone in the house. As I finished the sentence, we heard long drawn-out steps over our heads, pacing the same place for a few minutes as we stood frozen. When they stopped, we called our parents immediately and don't move till they get home. There was nothing stolen, no things out of place. But I didn't stay in that house alone for a month. This event happened years ago. When my mom and dad were about to sleep, they heard something scratching on the rooftop. My dad decided to check if there was an animal or something. He took the torchlight, went outside and checked the roof. He was shocked to see a woman, probably ghost if you want to believe it, with a bloody white dress, kept on scratching the rooftop. Being the brave man as he is, he decided to pick a stick and threw it at the woman. My father told me that she flew away and vanished. Another story, my brother's friends once told me that they also saw a woman standing on my rooftop when they passed by my house one night. To this day I feel afraid to look at my rooftop at night. A few years back, my best friend and I were sitting in the back room of my house, and my husband is in our living room. Suddenly we heard sirens and a helicopter that was saying something on the loudspeaker. We go to the window and see police blocking off our street, and can hear the helicopter telling us to stay inside. This was a little unsettling, but not something I had never experienced in my neighborhood. The cops were looking for a shooting suspect that had run into our neighborhood. We lock all the doors and go back to what we are doing. A few minutes later we hear a noise in the dining room, and my husband runs into the back room and tells us not to come out. I ask him what is going on, and he says that someone just tried to pull open our sliding glass door, but ran off and jumped the fence when it wouldn't open. My husband runs to the front of the house and yells at the cops that the guy they are looking for was just tried to get into our house. They take off after him and then catch him hiding out in a backyard a few houses down from us. I have no idea what would have happened if he was able to open our door, but I've never been so happy that we had our doors locked. I've posted this story elsewhere, so I'm just gonna copy from there. Back when my family lived in this old farmhouse in Brahman, OK. My dad had just left to go pick up my uncle and cousin from Kansas to go fishing. It was roughly 3 to 4 a.m. and my brother was slowly getting ready as I was downstairs in the living rooms watching The Crocodile Hunter, and everyone else was asleep. Whole room is dark, and the couch I'm sitting on is those corner couches where there's a gap where I put my toys. I all of a sudden got an urge to look out towards the window, and I see what looked like a head barely come up and go back down. Shrug it off and go back to watching. Turn back towards the corner after a few minutes, and I see 2 heads at the same height looking at me, pair of yellow eyes each. It didn't have a neck, so it rules out any human or animal. I screamed and ran to my mom's room. When my dad came home, he flipped the couch and didn't find anything. I later named the ghost Buddy and never had any more encounters. Family thought I was crazy. Years later, after we moved and parents divorced, we would hear doors shutting in the basement when no one was down there. Even heard someone walking up the stairs one day. My mother used to have this old flip phone, and she found an odd video on it. Someone walking very stiff toward the person holding the phone. We can't make out the face in the video, and it ends before it gets close enough. My mom didn't know how to work the camera back then, and I knew to never get in her purse. She also recently found a child's footprint in the basement after they had the floor painted. She lives with her wife and dogs, so no children going downstairs. I believe Buddy had followed us when we moved. My childhood house has always been creepy. Things would disappear in front of my eyes. my brothers and I would hear pans, pots and steps downstairs in the kitchen in the middle of the night, while our parents were out. For the most part I ignored everything because my mother was the kind of person who would almost get mad at you for believing there were things such as ghosts or spirits. Once when I was around 11 years old and my brother was 17, we were hanging out in his room, talking about random stuff. In there he had a desk with a chair, a small lazy boy, and his bed set up in different corners of his room. I was on the lazy boy and he was sitting on his bed. Suddenly, as we are in the middle of our conversation, a shirt that was sitting on the back of the chair, lifted up about 6 inches off the chair and fell back. It wasn't the wind. Wind doesn't blow from the ground up, at least not in a room in the back corner of a house. My brother and I looked at each other, laughed, and decided to go leave that room, stat. Since then I would often see shadows, or silhouettes through mirrors, only to turn around, try to follow it, and it'd be gone. We moved out of that house a couple years later, and never again did I experience anything like that. I feel that all those years, when my mom was getting mad at us for believing in ghosts, she actually had her own encounters with said ghosts, but was trying to not feed our fear by denying their existence. This isn't paranormal, but it's pretty weird and creepy. One night my friends and I went to an old church that was said to be haunted. The place was pretty much in the middle of nowhere and had been abandoned for years. There are a bunch of stories of paranormal stuff, devil worshippers etc., which are pretty well known in the area, and the place attracts quite a few people. There were a few other groups of people there when we got there. Me and one of my friends got separated from our group of friends at one point, and we got chatting to a gothy type boyfriend/girlfriend couple. I was saying how I was pretty underwhelmed by the place, I thought it'd be scarier etc., and the guy said, "Have you seen the witch's hut?" We hadn't, and we were wanted to see it. They told us it was the scariest bit. Me and my friend were keen to go and see it, but I remember saying we should go and get the rest of our friends to come too. The goth couple were kinda insistent that we shouldn't. Sounds like alarm bells should have started ringing, but I felt really comfortable with these people. They lead us quite far away and made us go a bunch of bushes, until we got to a little opening surrounded by trees. There was no hut, it was clear that there never was, it was just a little open area surrounded by trees. We stood there for a couple of seconds just facing each other, and asked, "Is this it?" And they said yes. I was instantly creeped out and said let's go, and we walked back and found the rest of our friends. I still wonder what on earth that was all about. I wonder if it was just a dream sometimes. I just don't understand the whole thing. I used to live on a rural county road. From my lane where you could look left and right, and have an unobstructed view of about a quarter mile. I had between 5 or 6 acres of woods behind my house in which, as a child, I would explore and climb trees, the usual kid in the woods stuff. The woods bordered the highway, and so I could always hear cars passing nearby. There were several neighboring houses on that road, but they were few and far between. Being a quiet area, it wasn't uncommon to hear people outside their homes conversing or doing chores. One day as I was climbing a tree, I heard some people participating in what seemed to be a party, nothing unusual. Out of nowhere I hear tires screech, the kind of screech a car makes when it's going from 100 km/h to 0 as quickly as possible. Followed by a thud, smash, then a howling Jonathan. Only to be preceded by deep, grown man sobbing. All of this was coming from the direction of the highway. I jump out of the tree, heart pounding, and run to the highway. I jump the fence and come onto the shoulder. I look left, nothing. I look right, no one. I walk down past the more close-by houses and no one is outside, no one is partying, it's dead silent, eerie silence. I went back to my house and tried to shake it off, although I was very rattled. I was 12 and moved from that house at 17, nothing like that ever happened again. Doctor, I was 12 in the woods behind my house when I heard what sounded like a child getting hit by a car, only to discover that there was no sign of anyone on the highway at all. It is weird to admit to yourself as a sane person that ghosts are real. I still have trouble believing what I experienced. Repeating it out loud feels absurd. I seriously feel like an idiot every time I tell this story, but it happened. My 5th grade year in school, something akin to a third eye opened briefly for me and I could actually see them. Or at the very least they were attracted to me for a brief time and revealed themselves. Sometimes I speculate that puberty and the changing of my brain chemistry / pineal gland somehow induced this temporary mental state. I would often see baseball-sized orbs in the corners of my bedroom that appeared bright at first glance. Strangely, they did not illuminate objects around them. This happened on multiple occasions, usually in the middle of the evening during homework. I would stand up from my desk and run out of the room whenever they presented themselves. That same year I went to stay with my grandparents for a week and I ended up sleeping in their apartment-sized basement that was supposedly older than the house itself, on some farmland in the middle of nowhere in South Dakota. The first night was the strangest experience of my entire life. A few minutes after I lay down on the queen-sized bed, the mattress suddenly sinks down completely on one side, as if a horse had gotten in bed next to me. I bolted upstairs as fast as my legs could carry me. On the second night, I was much less keen to sleep by myself, so I piled into the bedroom at the other end of the apartment-sized basement that my cousins were sleeping in. I shared a bed with one of my cousins that night, and I remember trying to wake him as soon as the orb appeared in the top right corner of the bedroom. He didn't want to look at it, he meekly replied. I didn't blame him one bit, and that was the end of the discussion. I spent the rest of the night trying my best to not garner its attention and fell into an uneasy slumber. Like I said at the beginning, I feel a slight twinge of embarrassment when I repeat this story. I would like to reiterate that this is not a troll, there is no tree fiddy. This really happened to me, at an old enough age where I was fully cognizant of what was happening. I swear to you that the paranormal does indeed exist. And it really does make you question everything.